Hi, everyone. Welcome to UW Communication Leadership Graduate Program Crit Panel. I am Liao Zhao, the head of outreach at Comm Lead program. It's really great to see everyone here. And for those of you who might not know much about the Communication Leadership Program, or Comm Lead, as we like to call it, it is a graduate program at University of Washington, offering communication degrees in digital media, communication leadership, communities, and networks. So if you are interested in learning more about our program, please feel free to reach out to us at the email address in the chat box. Our event coordinator will share that in the chat box, or attend info session through the link in the chat box. Our program's open house will be held on November 18th, and you can click the link in the chat box to learn more details and register for the event. Thank you, Marina. So as you may know, today's panel session's topic is about navigating a career in communications in the post-pandemic area. And we'll bring on board 4 very accomplished Comm Lead alumni who can tell with us about how they have navigated their careers through and after the pandemic. And we have Tari Finero, Tongtong Chu, Jacob Christensen, and Britt Martin. And now I'd like to ask them to introduce themselves now. For our panelists, please share with us your academic backgrounds, including your relationship with Comm Lead or Comm departments, and also your current role, organizations, as well as where are you based. How about we start with Jacob?
Hello, my name is Jacob. I have a lot of association with the university. I did my undergrad there, I did a certificate program there, and I did Comm Lead there. When I graduated, I was the leader of the Alumni Fellows for 2 years. And now this quarter, I actually see some of my students are in the room right now. I'm faculty, so teaching the fundamentals of video storytelling in the program. I absolutely love UW, very biased, but it's an amazing program. I am based out of Whidbey Island, so close to Seattle, but a wee bit of a commute in when I do come to teach. And I run a video production company. We're a small storytelling boutique company that basically does just about any and everything, which I think we're going to be diving into a bit in the course of tonight. So I won't go super far into it, but basically creative storytelling with moving pictures. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Jacob. Britt, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Britt Martin. I am cohort 14. I also, like Jacob, did my undergrad at UW and did the Comm Lead program. So I am a Husky through and through, so much so that I have a tattoo. And I am now a DEI or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager at Peloton or Peloton Interactive. If you're unsure what that is, it's those cool bikes with the screens that a lot of people have in their homes now. And I am based out of Dallas, Texas.
Thank you, Britt. Welcome. Tongtong?
Hello, everyone. My name is Tongtong. I'm from cohort 18. I'm CDM. I graduated from UW in 2020, Communication Leadership Program. And also back to like 7 years ago, I also did my undergrad at UW. So I finished my undergrad majoring in communication and media studies, minor in nutritional science. And right after graduation, about 6 months later, I joined Comm Lead program. I'm currently working at SB Concur as a digital marketing manager, specifically focused on social media program. Yeah.
Thank you, Tongtong. Tari, your turn.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Tori, and I'm talking from my phone, but my video is from another account. So apologies for the switch there. But yeah, I'm Tori Pinero. I am Comm Lead cohort 17. I was MCDM as well. I did the program in about 2 years. My other educational background, I have a master's in fisheries ecology, and my undergrad was that was from UVM, and my undergrad was at BU, Boston University. And yeah, so that's my educational background. I was also an alumni fellow and was the leader of the alumni fellows last year, passed it on to Tong Tong, who is now our fearless leader as well. So lots of connections to Comm Lead. And my current role is a UX senior UX design manager at Microsoft. So I lead a small team of UX designers in creating end-to-end UX flows for all of the reporting aspects of Microsoft Power BI, which is our data analytics software. And where am I based? In Seattle.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So thank you everyone for your introduction. So now I'd like to begin the session by asking if you could share with us more about your role, what you exactly do, and what skills do you think are necessary to launch a career in a role like that? So this question, let's start with Tonto.
Sure. So I'm a part of the digital marketing, specifically digital engagement team at SB Concur. So before I joined my current team, I was an intern for the global channel marketing team at the same company before the pandemic. So for my current role, my main focus is social media, specifically include the LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and sometimes any owned media content on our company's website. Before I took my current job, digital marketing is a very broad area for me. But as I'm working on my current role and talking to people, collaborating with people from different part of digital marketing, I feel like there's specific skill set is good to have, but maybe not like necessary. For example, if you're able to use Adobe, or if you're able to use any data analysis tools, that will be super helpful. And also it depends on what kind of organization or the size of organization you work for. So I've been working for startups before, and it kind of requires you to do everything. But for like larger organization, you sometimes only focus on a specific area, more part of a big project. So it depends, but always good to learn something new and also have basic skill set when you start your professional career. But always good, there's on-job learning and different learning opportunities through your professional journey as well.
Thank you, Tonto, for sharing about that. Tonto, whom do you want to?
I'll point on to Tori.
Cool, thanks. So the question is, what exactly do I do as a UX design manager? I am responsible for planning out what we're going to design next semester and how that aligns to our business goals, our technology that we have, and the scope of technology that we're going to have in the next quarter. And so I'm responsible for kind of the high level design planning. So mapping out things like information architecture, defining how personas need to work with the software, thinking about defining all of the different concepts that the users are going to have to deal with in solving the problem that they need to solve. So I'm doing kind of like the zoomed out high level thinking with people like my manager, with PM managers, with engineer managers, in order to create like this skeleton of understanding of the problem space and define the problem really clearly. And my team, so the direct reports that I have are all interaction designers. And what they do is they take specific parts of the project and go forth and continue the design process. So once we all convene together to kind of define the problem space and understand what we're doing, then they go off and they start wireframing and working with researchers and iterating on their designs and going all the way to the end where we have a finished flow that we can pass over to the engineers and they can go build out. And then we monitor and also make updates to that too. What skills do I think are necessary to launch a career? So I have a list over here, and some of them range from kind of innate personality traits to skill sets that you can learn. So I think having an initiative and curious nature is super important. So being someone who's very investigative, who wants to go in and understand the like depths of a problem that they don't fully have their brain wrapped around, know who to talk to. And if you don't know who to talk to, be okay with asking. So kind of having that investigator hat on is really important throughout the entire design process. Another part is problem solving. Sorry, not despairing at ambiguous, thorny problems, being confident and strong-willed. Some people might not understand your role, especially if we're talking about dealing with other stakeholders. Sorry, I should have had water. I'm like choking.
It's
Talking
okay. Yeah, Tari.
Yeah.
If you want to get water, that's fine.
No, it's okay. I'll grab it in a second.
Okay.
So you will run into people who don't understand what you do. They might brush off your input and box you into just being kind of a copy editor if you're a content designer, or just a pixel pusher if you're a UX designer. So what you need to do is have the confidence and determination to speak up and be heard and to actually make things happen. And then obviously you need the UX proficiency, either through self-learning, through experience in past jobs, or through taking a program like Comm Lead, in order to understand the UX best practices and how things work, interacting with lots of other stakeholders. And if you want to do the content design route, obviously you have to have really strong writing skills, which are things that you can gain from other writing career paths that you've had in the past, or like a program like Comm Lead. So yeah.
Thank you, Tari. Grab your water, take a
Thank
break,
you.
and let's have Jacob to take over the conversation.
Yeah, Tori, your explanation was incredibly well put together, and I don't know if I can clearly, succinctly say what the heck I do on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, in general, we create video content for clients. We go and listen to them, hear what their needs are, hear what they think they need, come up with our own suggestions. Sometimes they do have the right thing in mind, but sometimes, it's really us coming to the table with, hey, we hear that you want to influence people in this way, like here's, our ideas. My day-to-day is really anything from sitting down and answering 500 emails regarding an upcoming production, or yesterday I actually directed a production on top of the Space Needle. So it is widely varied of what the heck I do on a day-to-day basis, which is actually one of my favorite parts of the job, because I'm not great at sitting down and sitting at a single desk and trucking along. The skills necessary to launch a career, specifically in my role, is, fairly specialized. You need to know a lot of different things. That was terrible phrasing, but I know a fair amount about audio. I know a fair amount about cameras, about story, about interacting with clients, about leadership through communication leadership. And really, if you want to do something like I do, which as a creative director, I have to kind of understand every component of the different, crews in my care, you have to learn a lot. It's definitely possible. Comm Lead is a great place to start. There are a lot of online assets nowadays. I learned a lot of what I know through watching YouTube videos and whatnot. And I actually make these YouTube videos now that go and teach people. But at the end of the day, pick up a camera. It can be your phone, and just like start creating, because one thing leads to the next, and eventually you're on top of the Space Needle filming stuff. So
that is so cool, Jacob. Britt, you are in a totally different industry, but yeah, share with us.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm gonna switch it up on you, on everyone really quick. So I am, like I said, a diversity, equity, and inclusion manager at Peloton. And people always ask me, so what do you actually do? Like, what does that mean? What is DEI? Like, how does that ladder up to, such a large corporation? And so we get to have these talks very often. But in a nutshell, what my team's responsibility is to ultimately ensure that Peloton is a inclusive, diverse, and equitable organization. And that's very, very high level. Digging down a little bit more specific to what my day-to-day it really consists of, and the things I'm responsible for, is partnering with our function heads, or most senior leaders in the company, and their leadership teams to create kind of bespoke DEI strategies for their specific teams. One thing we know about DEI is that it's not always going to work the same way for every team, and even for smaller teams within that team, right? But how we approach it is partnering directly with those teams on a very consistent basis to understand what their needs are. What are their challenges? Are your challenges around recruiting and hiring? And so maybe we need to have more conversations with hiring managers and workshops around inclusive decision making and how they debrief on candidates and things of that nature, where they're finding candidates, right? And so, so that's kind of one piece of the job. Another piece where I focus is I'm on Peloton's accessibility core team, which our goal is to kind of take stock of what Peloton is doing around accessibility around the organization, and also how can we be a more accessible company, because we know our member base is so vast, and we know that being a more accessible company when it comes to our product and to our online experiences and digital experiences will holistically make us a better company. I also kind of weaved comms into my job here, which is nice. So I lead all our DEI communications from the DEI team. So, you know, when there are company statements that need to be made both internally and externally, I work directly with our SVP or global head of DEI to craft those messages and figure out what our approach is and what makes sense for us as a company. Are these things that, you know, we can show that we've been doing over time? And, you know, it's hard when things happen out of nowhere, right? And I didn't necessarily go to school for crisis comms by any means. So, you know, it's very an interesting space where comms and DEI really come together. And it's a place that I've really enjoyed working in this role. And another kind of comms related thing I do in my role is I run our internal speaker series called Brave Conversations, a speaker series on race and equity, which is a quarterly speaker series that we bring to our team members all across the globe to talk about different topics around anti-racism and equity. And we've brought in Dr. Ibram Kendi, we've brought in Tarana Burke. Our most recent speaker was NBA All-Star Dwayne Wade. And we've just had really deep, very interesting conversations that have helped kind of shift the conversation that we're having internally with each other. And lastly, I would say another kind of comms thing is I do a lot of our executive support for SVP. So again, you know, messages coming from her, messages coming from our team, understanding where those messages should be, and kind of how that ladders up into our holistic comms plan for the organization. So skills to do the job, I think it's a lot of the specific things that everyone else have said here, you know, just like being able to be a leader and have confidence. And I think one of the biggest things in my role is, I would say, influential leadership. Most of my job is talking to people higher than, you know, my position, lower than my position. I need to be able to basically, you know, spread our message and create programming that applies to the retail associate in Kansas City, but also to, you know, the CTO in LA, right? Making sure that everything that we do is applicable to team members across the board. So being able to influence folks from all levels in an organization is a really important thing in this job. I would also say the other thing is, and this is so broad and I kind of hate to say it, but like practicing good judgment. There are so many times where the organization is coming to you for guidance and what do we do? DEI, how do we respond? And okay, we have this team member issue or this team member challenge, and you know, you're having to kind of, you know, respond fairly quickly, right? Because a lot of times, you know, when there's challenges, you know, or even good things, right, that happen in our world, the response is expected fairly quickly. So, you know, just being able to kind of have that, you know, good and sometimes quick judgment to be able to make the best decision for your organization at the time to move something forward. So, so those I would say probably the two key ones. Of course, you know, I didn't necessarily study for this job. This is by no means what I planned to do even after I graduated Comm Lead, to be honest with you. So I didn't necessarily study for this job. But there are, you know, for those of you who are interested in considering DEI as a career, there are now some certifications out there that you can get in DEI specifically. eCornell is one example, but there are things now that there didn't exist 5 years ago for folks interested in the DEI space as well.
That's amazing, Bray. Later we can come back to you to invite you to share more stories about your work and about DEI. And also you mentioned about part of your job is you talk to different people. And Jacob, you also mentioned about part of your job is to interact with clients. So my next question is for you. Like, we know that for video production, a lot of things need to be done in person in the past, but in the past year and a half during the pandemic, how did you find a new way to work with clients, and how do you find these clients?
Great question. You know, when everything initially shut down, we lost a ton of work. Super sad moment in time to have the carpet just pulled out from under us. But as a result, we had a lot of free time and we started innovating. We started figuring out how the heck we could make content. You know, the biggest pivot that we've seen is filming people remotely. We're in a conversation right now. It's being recorded. Something can be made of this, right? We've done a ton of remote content for the Department of Health. I honestly, I can't even mention how many clients because we've done so many. We've made legitimate 30-second ads that are being shown across TV from talking heads on remote video platforms. But, you know, a lot of that is, it's not just recording them, it's walking them through their lighting, walking them through their audio, capturing them, adding a lot of graphics, adding fun music, and, you know, like really elevating it to the point where people, you know, you kind of scratch your head and you're like, is that a Zoom call anymore? I don't know if it is. It looks really nice. In terms of actually reaching clients though, you know, for that example specifically, we actually did a whole behind the scenes video of how we could produce that type of content. And we didn't have a single paying client doing that yet. And now we've made like 100+ video projects in that same vein. But really, and this is a huge takeaway for at any point in your career, wherever you are, if you have a job, if you don't have a job, if you're growing, if you're a student, whatever, tell your story. It does not matter if you post once a month on Instagram or share something once a day on LinkedIn. You know, you just need to allow other people to know and be aware of what you're doing. A lot of the business that we've found through the pandemic is a result of taking behind the scenes content, writing blogs of how we're approaching content, like recording remotely and turning that into the high quality content. And we're just sharing it. Half the time it goes out into the ether. My mom and 3 other people like it. And it's like, great. No one really, whatever. No one really knows. But then I'll be in a conversation with someone and they'll mention it. They didn't like it. They didn't comment on it, but they saw it and was in the back of their mind. So I have just found that even if you feel like it's just shouting into a void, telling people where you're at, telling people that you're wanting to attend grad school, telling people that you are, telling people what assignments you're working on and what's exciting you and whatnot, you know, it's all how you get opportunities. You know, there's the phrase of you should network before you need a job is so real because, you know, if you go around with a business card in your pocket and you say, I need a job today, most people are not as willing to hire you as, hey, you know, I'm just looking for opportunities to connect with people. You get coffee with them, whether it's digital and remote or not. And then 6 months down the line, when you do need the job, hopefully that relationship is there to support it. But yeah, my biggest takeaway from the entire pandemic experience is you have to tell your story. And now more than ever, it needs to be online and it needs to be accessible to so many people. And, you know, just like one last example of why that's so important and why it's so powerful is I can release a video or a behind the scenes photo or a blog or a whatever, and 100 people can interact with it. 1,000 people can interact with it. And if they can see, oh, that guy smiles, he seems kind of friendly, I might enjoy being on the road with him for a week because we're going to go film in Alaska or whatever it is. You know, they need to, it's like a first date. It's like getting coffee with me for the first time. It's realizing, oh, we're actually on the same wavelength. We're on the same page. And yeah, I don't hate this person. So now we're through the first stage. We are interacting. They have a sense of who I am, and we can just cut through all the BS because that means that people that hopefully are going to enjoy working with me are reaching out. And, you know, we whether or not we like it, our brands are everywhere. Our personal social media pages are relatively public. Even if you have it all locked up, like you do have friends that see that content and those friends may hire you down the road or whatever. So yeah, just considering, I don't think we have to sell our souls, and I don't think that you need to be fake on social media. I think being authentic and, you know, being your true self is exactly how you actually get hired. So whoever you are, wherever you are, doing whatever, it is not too late to start telling your story, and it is by all means incredibly valuable to share that content online.
Thank you, Jacob. I think you almost hit our last question as well, to share a valuable job search related tip to tell your story. And you have to think about another strategy or tip to share later. Okay, now the next question is actually for Tari. So Tari, first we want to congratulations because you just got promoted at Microsoft. And there you started as a content designer and then recently moving to a new role as a senior UX designer manager to lead a team. So could you please share with us how you made this transition, and when you are hiring a new team member, what kind of candidate are you looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So how I made that transition as a content designer, that was, I want to back up to the beginning of that story too. That was my first role in UX. That was my first role in tech. That was my first role that was not in science. So my actual background, like not actual background, because our backgrounds change as we move on with our career. But my original background is in fisheries ecology. So I've been a marine ecologist, fisheries ecologist since I pretty much was in high school when I started volunteering at labs. And then went to undergrad for the same thing, was doing tons of research in undergrad, field research in the ocean and the Caribbean. I was up in Stellwagen Bank, all kinds of field work, very adventurous and super fun, or really boring and just doing statistics in front of a computer. So there was ups and downs to that. And then when I went to grad school for that, when I went to get my master's for fisheries ecology, I was finding that my favorite part of what I was doing was getting to communicate with different folks about the science that I was doing, whether that was potential lab donors, whether that was political folks who could possibly give us funding, or just people in the community who were curious about why I was cutting fish open on the side of the lake and putting transmitters inside of them. And so communicating my science, I found, was my passion. I loved making infographics to share the story of what was going on and stuff like that. And that's kind of what motivated me to transition out of science and into the communications field, because I wanted to do science communication. So I went to Comm Lead, and that's where I discovered the word UX in grad school, probably in my like third or fourth class. So I was there for a while before I even knew what this was. And I took the class only because I heard so many people saying it that I was just like, you know what, I should probably just take the class so I don't seem like such a dummy when other people are talking about it. So when I joined Microsoft as a content designer, I had taken every single UX and content class that was available at Comm Lead. I was still in Comm Lead. I was 3 months away from graduating. And how I got the role was I made a portfolio website that, you know, fully represented like me as a human and also the type of work that I'm interested in. And most importantly, what I'm passionate about and what motivates me. I think those are the two things that when I look for people, when I'm hiring and when I was being hired, those were the things that stand out. In addition to obviously your experience and your skills, but I think those two things are really important key nuggets. And so I posted my portfolio website all over the place, including some Facebook groups for content designers. And my boss literally messaged me on Facebook and was like, you did fish stuff. That's a weird background. Do you want to come to Microsoft to talk about it and talk about content design? And I thought it was a joke. I literally I went on her Facebook and stalked her really hard to make sure she was the legitimate person. And I was like, oh wait, she actually wants to talk to me. That's pretty cool. And we totally hit it off. And I realized that what UX is at its core is problem solving and puzzle solving. You need to understand this insanely technical thing that these experts, these engineers some of them have been there since Microsoft started, and these PMs who communicate with these massive customers like Walmart and these giant enterprise companies. And you need to pull all of the expertise out of them, lay it on the table, and understand, how do I take this information? How do I take these complicated systems and processes and turn them into an interface that a person can get through and be delighted and get done what they need to get done? I'm not going to be able to recite the actual Microsoft motto, but it's something like empowering everyone to get more things done and to be more efficient, and to do it in a way that makes them happy and they're delighted by it. And so communicating to me, communicating that complexity that I'm getting from the subject matter expertise and experts into a user flow and a user experience that's seamless and captivating is the same as when I was sitting on the side of the lake doing surgery on a fish and explaining to a fisherman what I was doing. It's this storytelling of taking something that's big and involved in a lot of things and bringing it down to the core pieces. And so when I went into content design, I went into content design because that was what was available. And the storytelling part of it was incredible. And I loved doing that. And it was so much fun, and being in rooms and whiteboarding and figuring stuff out, going to find new people when I couldn't get to the core of something, I needed more info. And so I found that, yes, I was doing content design. And I'll do a quick description of that. Content design in relation to an interaction designer. A content designer is the person who is responsible for all of the words in any flow. So you're a writer as well as a UX designer at the same time. So I was doing content design obviously every day and doing lots of technical writing and UI writing. But really what I was spending most of my time doing is I was, well, why does this actually work this way? Tell me why the screen is here. Tell me why this site is structured, how it's structured. And I ended up spending a lot more of my time on these high-level strategical discussions and this concept definition, to the point that PMs were putting me in front of customers sometimes because the engineers simply could not explain what they were trying to do. And they were like, here, Tori will do it. And people would be like, who is this? What is this person from the design org doing in a customer meeting? And I just really loved doing it. And so that is kind of how I ended up making my transition from content designer to UX design manager, because my passion for getting the complicated parts into something that makes sense is really useful for that level of the management structure, because I'm able to make all those definitions and work with folks to understand the problem, and then hand things off to different designers to go do their amazing work and build the solution to it. And I'm also part of that process too, but I feel like where I bring the most value is in the beginning phases of definition, and then I can also provide lots of input going down the line with actual implementation. And I'll be quick about the next one because I've been blabbing on forever. The next question was, when you're hiring a new team member, what candidates are you looking for? So I'm going to delve in a little bit deeper to what I was talking about earlier with that list that I mentioned. So you love being on a mission for the answer, reaching out to stakeholders, contacts of contacts, and to get to the bottom of how something works. Others would describe you as self-starter, scrappy, determined, and enterprising. You don't despair at weedy, highly technical problems. Honestly, sometimes no one else on the team can solve them. The buck stops with you. You actually get excited to be the one to sort of sort it out and bring things into crystal focus. And others would describe you as clever, creative, and resourceful. And then for actual, if I was hiring a UX content designer, again, you're a kick-ass writer, you've written in other professions, you're not too flowery, but you're not too robotic. And then the UX side as well, you have strong opinions about a flow, a structure, a surface. You care about everything from architecture and concept all the way down to like pixel perfect where this button is. And you're doing that from an empathetic, user-focused place. And then, yeah, being confident and strong-willed is super important, because you have to fight for user empathy before anything else, and while also balancing the business needs and the technical limitations, which is a tough balance to strike. But yeah, that's that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Tori. Yeah, getting to your story and your work content, I think for both Tori and Jacob, they share a lot about the work content, exactly what they do. Maybe we can move back to a little bit about work and life balance. So maybe Tong can talk more about that. Because we know that you start your first full-time job remotely at SAP. So how do you adapt to this new environment to work remotely every day? And any tips for students who are navigating this after a pandemic or during a pandemic?
Thank you, Leo. That's a great question. Since I've been struggling during my first year, I graduated in March 2020. Probably I finished my last class 2 weeks before the pandemic. So, but for my current role, I secured my offer in February, probably only a week before the pandemic. So, but my onboard time is actually April 2020. So during the month from March to April, I finished the grad school. I finished my internship, and the only thing I do is just waiting at home. And also I was anxious because many of my friends, they got offer from other organization and their offer was revoked because of the pandemic. So I was kind of like worried since on the one hand, I'm fresh new grad. I didn't have that much professional experience. And on the other hand, I'm an international student. So hiring me means there's some extra work the employer has to do. So they need to put more effort and money invest on me. But I feel grateful. I made it. I was on board in April. Although I've been working for the same organization for 10 months before my current role as an intern, but my current team is totally different team in a different org compared with my previous team. So I love both, but to be honest, there are like totally different vibes. And also, especially in the remote world, people use different software, like different tools to communicate. They have their own preferences. So I'm on like different communication channels every day, include Slack, Teams, Zoom, in the past Skype, and also emails. So there's like conversations happen everywhere. So one of the things that I feel it's super important to onboard a new job remotely or trying to communicate with your team members in a remote world is get familiar with different communication tools and knows the pros and cons for different platforms, and also being transparent about your own preference, but also ask people their preference, since some people might be a Slack person, some people might be a Teams person. So I think being able to know their communication preference is also important. That means you can find the person you want to talk to or follow up with some on some projects easier, since that's the channel they preferred. That's the way they prefer to be communicated with. And for me, since as Bill mentioned, this is kind of like my first full-time job after Comm Lead program. So it's also a challenge for me, try to manage life and work, try to find a good balance, since being an intern is different compared with being a full-time employee. So maybe the workload sometimes is similar, but still like the mindset is totally different. So for when I was an intern, I thought, oh, I'm just a student. I'm here to learn. So I get used to ask people for feedback, ask people for guidance, or trying to like always be humble. But being a full-time employee, they require you to take lead and also take initiative. So I think that's also something I'm trying to learn during my first 3 months. Sometimes I know the answer and I want to speak up, but I'm hesitant because I thought, oh, this is my first job. I'm just on the road like a month. Should I speak up for that? Maybe I do not have enough like historical background to speak of the problem, or maybe I have a great idea, but I will tell myself that, oh, maybe someone already have that idea. They just got passed. So I have a lot of battles in mind with myself. But I also appreciate I have a great team. They're super supportive. I think that's also important to have a supported team while you are on board in the remote world. So I haven't met all my team members in person yet, and it's been almost 2 years. And also, I think another thing I learned from working from home is be open-minded and respect for people's different schedules. So my team is a little bit special since we work with people from almost like 26 different countries. So that's one of the biggest challenge I have during the past year, since to manage different time differences. And we have early morning calls, we have late evening calls. And at first I try to like respond to all the emails and messages as fast as I can, even it's maybe midnight. But later on, I feel like I would be burnt out if I continue to do that. And I know that my team didn't have that kind of expectation. It's just me. I hate to see that like hundreds of unread emails in my inbox. So that's why I always try to clean up as much as I can. But I feel like it's really important to find some time for yourself and also find a way to de-stress. So maybe people love to doing exercise after work, or maybe some of my team members, they take a walk between calls, or some people even take a walk while they're in a meeting. So I think people have different ways to find their own balance. And also the balance is our own balance, not other people's balance. So some people may find that they would like to work between 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., but they would like to use some of the hours in the day to do other stuff. I think that's totally fine if the organization provide that opportunity, but doesn't mean that you work from 7 to 7 and then they are online in the evening. You also need to work in the evening, like 12 or 15 hours per day. So I think that's the thing that I've been struggling for so long. But I really appreciate, I talked to different people, and I was so lost for working longer hours, but I appreciate all people give me that advice. And also for at least for this quarter, I feel like I'm doing a better job. So I hope everyone just find your own balance. And people always say that work smarter, not harder. But for me, I'm like, work hard is one of the things like rooted in my blood, because I'm from China, and how my parents taught me from a young kid is work hard. But now I feel like work hard is important, but also in a smarter way. So that's one of the top things I learned from my first job.
Thank you, Tong Tong, for sharing with us your strategy about how to balance between work hard and work smart. And Tong Tong is not the only one to work remotely. I think Braids, you are also working remotely as well. So, and actually with the boost of in-home workouts, Palantir has become an exciting place to work at. So how did you find your current role during the pandemic? And what do you think is something that people need to be aware of as they launch their careers in this post-pandemic era?
Yes, great questions. So first, how I got my current role. I think one thing for context to remember about the DEI space is while there was a pandemic happening, there was obviously a lot of civil unrest that was happening at the same time. So in 2020, we saw a lot of companies make statements around anti-racism and anti, right? There was a huge influx of needs for DEI practitioners. There were, I feel like this huge boom in what I was doing specifically, which was so interesting because in DEI, you kind of have this feeling, and even when I was working for T-Mobile, which is where I was before Peloton for about 6 years, you're still kind of always trying to fight the fight, right? Like you're always trying to why is DEI important, right? How does this affect my bottom line? You're constantly trying to get leaders on board, and then something happens and everyone's like, oh my gosh, it is important and we do need it. And this is why we need it. And now we're seeing, so all of a sudden it was like these barriers were coming down in our work, and it was no longer convince your leaders that this is important. It was get someone in here to do this work because it's so important. We need to put resources behind it. We need to do it now. So Peloton was like many of those other companies. In June 2020, they launched what they call the Peloton Pledge. It was their response to, George Floyd's murder. And what that was is a $100 million 4-year pledge to Peloton becoming an anti-racist organization. Huge commitment, right? What's interesting is this commitment was made before there was a DEI team. So of course, soon after that, the job was posted and someone had reached out to me on LinkedIn, which LinkedIn is my favorite. If you don't have it and you're looking for jobs, at very, very minimum, have a good LinkedIn profile. And someone from Peloton found me and kind of asked if I was interested. And I was like, I mean, yeah, like, this is kind of cool. Like, I don't have a bike or anything, but like, like I'll check it out and see what's up. And I loved who I interviewed with. I loved the opportunity of going into a not established program whatsoever, and being able to lay that foundation of what DEI at Peloton was going to be, and having that incredible resource and executive support behind you. $100 million is a big commitment. Then you have the commitment to build out a team on top of that. And I can tell you, just in, we just kind of passed our 1 year kind of anniversary, if you will, of the Peloton Pledge. And I can tell you that commitment has done nothing but increase. And I know, 3 years ago, many of us as practitioners were still kind of struggling to get the support that we needed to make the changes that were necessary for our workplaces. So, I'll say that because it wasn't super hard to find DEI jobs once we hit mid-2020, right? There was, again, like this vast need. And I can tell you since then, I mean, I get LinkedIn messages all the time from companies all the time, about like, hey, we need someone and we're building out a team and we need a leader and we need someone with experience. And, to be honest, I just am like, I feel lucky that I got into DEI before it was, kind of more of a trendier role, if you will, because I had the experience, which gave me the ability to pick, what I wanted to do next and where I wanted to do it. I will say, advice for anyone looking for a career, post-pandemic, during pandemic, all things pandemic. I'll go back to my original note about LinkedIn. Like, LinkedIn is my best friend. I feel like it has gotten me connections I never thought I'd have. It has gotten me interviews for roles I'd never thought I'd even be qualified to apply for. And it's opened a lot of different doors for me, and I always encourage it. Also, kind of just outside from like those tactical things, it's like, I am just a big proponent of like, you have to believe in yourself. And I know it sounds kind of silly and it kind of sounds just bare minimum, but even when things are stacked against you, which, let's be honest, right now in this job market, yeah, the odds are stacked against us, in many ways, and it's hard to navigate through that. And there's many times where we're going to have those moments of doubt. I remember when I was looking for my first job right after Comm Lead, and I really struggled for like a month or two before graduation. Just like, I felt like I was just like throwing myself out in an ocean and like hoping somebody would catch me, and it was really hard. And so you have those moments of like, gosh, like nobody wants me, like they don't want me to work for them, I'm not good enough. You have all those doubts and feelings. And I would say, in those moments, that's when it's so important to remember who you are, to remember what you've done, to remember the sacrifices you've made and what you've done to get to where you are. And one thing I mentioned earlier, we just had an event with Dwayne Wade, so I'm totally going to steal this from him. But he has this kind of this quote, famous quote, if you will, and it just really resonated with me. So I'm going to share it with you all. And he says, "My belief in myself is stronger than your doubt." And I was just like, yes, like that's so true. Like you have to think that way, because at the end of the day, you're trying to convince the world or the company or this manager to buy in on you. But if you're not bought in on yourself, and if you can't believe that wholeheartedly, it will be so hard and so much harder to navigate trying to find a place where you ultimately feel like you can be successful and you can thrive. And I feel like sometimes when we have less belief, we tend to settle for things, right? And jobs included. Were there times where like I probably took a job immediately because it was the best thing to do immediately, and I could have probably got something better if I waited? Yeah, sure, that's definitely happened. Like, I have been very impatient at times in my career, but yeah, I mean, I think, regardless of anything else, like if there's one thing I would say is just to remember who you are, right? And just take that with you every step of the way, because and going back to Jacob's point earlier, no one has your story. Your story is yours and it's unique to you, and your superpowers are unique to you, and know that and feel that and take that with you to every interview, every networking interaction you have. You just have to remember that it's important to put yourself on that pedestal sometimes.
Thank you, Britt. Yeah, I feel like you get a little bit emotional, and we feel the same way too. Like, think about how we can share our resume, but don't feel like it's being thrown into the ocean. So maybe it's time for four of you to share maybe one valuable job search related tip or a nugget of advice someone gave you. Let's start with Jacob, if that is okay.
Yep. Yeah. One, I have two, so I'm cheating. One is a much simpler one of, working on a resume. There are a lot of really cheap templates of really nice looking resumes, and we are humans and we make snap decisions. And if we see a terrible resume, it doesn't really matter how qualified you are, it like immediately puts you in a different bin. So just spend like 30 minutes, an hour, like actually putting some time into that. I totally bought a template. So like by all means, it's like, it's okay to cheat. It's not cheating at all. It's a good thing because you're proving that you're resourceful. The big concept that I want to leave off with is it's an analogy. A lot of people that know me know that I say way too many analogies, but it's, if you want to catch a fish, you have to go fishing. That means you can't just be in a boat in the middle of the water. Fish rarely just jump into the boat. And if like even past that, you could be on land and like not be anywhere next to what the thing is that you want. If you want the work, you have to go and seek the work. You have to go and do the work. You have to prepare for the work. You have to find the boat. You have to get the gear. You have to put yourself out there. Some of what we do is luck. Sometimes a fish jumps in the boat. More often than not, you have to put in a lot of time and effort to actually get out there. And sometimes you feel like you're ready, and sometimes it's just the wrong time of day. There's no fish in the part of the lake that you're in. You just have to go and put in the time. And I know that like that sucks as like a mental outlook of like sometimes you got to grind. But there are fish, so you just got to find your fish.
Tori, how to find your fish?
Sorry, did you see my name, Leah?
Yes, I did.
Okay, cool. No, yeah, I love the fish metaphors. Big fan. So what I would say so the first one, if you're going into any role where you need to show like a UX role, content design role, something like that, I would say video, any type of content production role, make a portfolio website and make it really nice. Set aside, and it sucks. I put it off for so long. I put it off for months and months and months. And then I kid you not, within 2 weeks of posting my portfolio website and like doing my networking strategy of like where I'm going to post it, how I'm going to do that, I was getting meetings with people. Because when people can see what your work looks like in a coherent story that also tells them a little bit about you, have way more of a foot in the door than folks who don't. Like I just met with a candidate literally 3 or 4 days ago who seemed super cool, had a lot of good design thinking, didn't have a portfolio to show me. And so what am I going to do? You know what I mean? If somebody has work that they put in front of me that I can see that's a backup for what they're saying, it's super valuable. So go make that, make it nice. And then the second part of putting it everywhere, literally put it everywhere. Scream it from the mountaintops. This is my portfolio, please look at it. But asking people just to look at it without any type of carrot is usually not going to work. How I like to do it, this is a little sneaky trick for me, go into the Facebook groups, the LinkedIn groups, the meetups, whatever it is, and post a question. Because people like to talk, myself included. People really like to talk, and people really like to be considered experts and have their advice asked for. So if you post a question in one of these groups, so for example, hey, I'm new to the area. I'm looking for content design meetups or content design lecture series or discussions to attend. Does anyone have anyone to recommend? And then spacebar. Also, this is my portfolio underneath it. So you have a bunch of people, bumping your post up in the algorithm because they're commenting answers and liking and hearting, but they also have your portfolio in front of them now that they might not have had it before. So those are my 2 big ones.
Great advice, Tori. Oh, great. Yeah.
Okay. Mine is, I feel like this is, again, far less tactical, but I have always been someone who really set on like, this is what I'm going to do in a year. This is what I'm going to do in 3 years and 5 years and so on. Like, have just been very specific about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, which is great. Great to have goals. But probably one of the best pieces of advice that I got and took wholeheartedly, was to be firm in my goals and to be flexible in my approach. And basically what I mean by that is like, it was totally cool for me to think like coming out of Comm Lead, I was going to be the first Black female GM in the NFL. Totally cool, still actually a goal of mine. However, how I'm going to get there has probably changed like 8 times, right? There's different things I know I have to do and things I learn over time and skills that I gain that I'm like, oh yeah, actually like that would be great for that eventually. So, you know, it's great to, again, have your big goals or your BHAGs if you've heard that before. But it's also important to just be flexible about how you're going to get there, because sometimes we can get really caught in our head about how something is supposed to go. And in those moments, we miss the opportunities that could have maybe taken us a different route or a better route, right? So if there's one thing I would say, that is it.
Thanks. Tom.
Yeah, so for me, I can speak from a person who just graduated from the program. So if you're like me, who do not have that much professional experience or years of experience in a specific area, I would always recommend like do your own homework. So the homework can be doing research for specific area you want to dive into, or research the job titles. So job title is not that important, to be honest, but more like the job descriptions. So before I'm on my current role, I thought job description is just a nice description, try to like attract people. But when I'm on my job for a year, I look back the job description back then, I feel like every single bullet points is matched with what I'm currently doing. And there are always more, but some basic stuff is always there. So if you're not sure if this is a job you want, always do research about the job description. Or maybe one thing I already do, sounds a little bit creepy, but I already just go to LinkedIn and stalk people who are on similar role. Sometimes they might in the same company, or sometimes maybe from a different organization, but with a similar job function or day-to-day work. So that's I already do. And also just be brave and don't be afraid of getting rejected. So for me, I would say when I apply 100 jobs online, I may only have 1 to 3 invite for interview. So I think it's totally fine. It's totally normal. And I'm a little bit shy when I just joined the Comm Lead program. So one thing that Anita shared with me before my first Friday event is you're only meet them for one time maybe in your life. So don't be afraid of making mistakes or be shy to talk to them. So I think you just need to put yourself there and always be strategic when looking for a job. So for me, I usually just apply online and go to the company's official website career page and just apply directly. But I know there's many people, they are willing to offer you as a reference or refer you to a specific role. So don't be afraid to ask. They are just there, but sometimes you do not ask, you do not get it.
Thanks, Tonton. Yeah, now it's time for our best part. You do not ask, you don't get it. So it's time for our Q&A part. And first, I want to thank you so much for all of your insightful answers. And now we still have 30 more minutes. So let's try to see if we can get all the questions from our participants. We'll try our best. And so to do that, let me pass it to our event coordinator, Marina, and she will help with facilitating this part and can either have you unmute yourself or just read the questions for you. Marina, thank you.
All right. While people send out their questions, I picked up on a lot of interest in what Victoria was sharing earlier. So maybe if you do want to elaborate on some of those topics you shared, like positioning your past experience as a value prop during career transitions on a more general level, like maybe what kind of questions can you ask yourself in that process or something, maybe that would be great for folks.
Awesome. Yeah. So the biggest thing for me is kind of creating that story. If you can create a coherent story of why you transitioned from one to another and why you're interested. Sorry, I have to cover my, I cover the screen so I don't look at myself talking and it went away. So here we go. Now it's covered. I'm not looking into my own eyes. So as far as positioning, yeah, so creating a cohesive narrative, telling the story in such a way that it makes sense and people buy it. And it's not fake. It's not something that you're making up, right? There is a reason why you moved from one thing to another. It's because either there was an element of what you did before that you really want to dive into, or there was this part of what you did before that gave you an epiphany about something else. So you have to really craft that narrative really well. So having the narrative, I think, is really important. Whatever your narrative is, nail it and be able to do it in like 60 seconds or less. 30 seconds is even better, but 60 seconds or less is great. And the more narrative it feels, the better. You know what I mean? Not bullet points, but like go through and tell them your story of why you want to do what you're doing now. And make sure to include the parts of what you used to do that make you super valuable to this new role. I found that like coming from a place that's so different than where I am now, like from small academia laboratory setting or fieldwork setting into working in one of the largest software companies in the world. The environments couldn't be more different, but the core elements of what we're doing are so similar. And the unique, diverse experience that I had in doing what I did before is a huge selling point, because I'm able to bring ideas and perspectives to the table based on my past experience. And I'll give you specifics of how I did that. When I did experimental design, half of what I did was figuring out the process that needed to be enacted in order to get the answers that I wanted. When I was designing experiments about fish, but that also applies directly to UX research. When I was doing science communication to convince Senator Leahy to donate more money to our lab so that we could get funded for the next year, what I was doing was convincing a key stakeholder of the value of my work, similar to what I do now, when I'm convincing a PM or something to actually let me do the right design, even though it costs a little bit more and it's going to take more engineering time. So you need to like find the things that you did in your old role that will translate to your new role in a way that makes sense, but also in a way that shows that you're building on your experience. Never, not never, I don't want to say never, because sometimes maybe this would work, but in general, I find that creating a narrative built on the building part is super valuable, because it shows that all of the experience that you've gained is kind of compounding to make you this super unique candidate that's going to bring something new to the table. And in this career climate, I think that's more important than anything else. People don't really want someone who's been doing the same thing. Don't necessarily want someone who's been doing the same thing for the whole time. Those people are super like subject matter experts, and they bring something really important to the table. But a new face with a fresh perspective also brings something important, and you need both to be successful. So in a career transition, you're the second type, and you just need to sell the story well.
Well, that's really great advice. Thank you for sharing that. And since I still don't see a ton of questions in the chat, maybe I'm just going to go ahead and ask a question I have. That's actually for Jacob. How much of that like kind of specific technical expertise do you think one has to bring to the job when applying, and how much can one actually learn on the job?
This is a great question, and is like honestly a topic that I absolutely dread. So you can definitely get jobs where you can learn as you go in terms of filmmaking, in terms of video production, storytelling. But I think the more and more I've seen, basically, there aren't a ton of jobs, of full-time jobs as filmmakers, as video storytellers. That's slowly shifting because it's slowly becoming the content that we consume all day, every day. but a lot of organizations are still way behind the ball on that. So as a result, you have the classic freelancer who has been working for 5 to 10 years. They're ready to settle down. They just want a consistent paycheck. So when a listing goes up from one of the local large companies, you are also competing against those people. Not all the time. There's different levels and everything. But I have found in general, most of the job listings are for like an intermediate to advanced, senior person. I hate to admit this, but I think I've done like 3 or 4 non-paid internships where I learned a lot about storytelling and learned a lot about how to use cameras. I've also, really put myself out there and worked on projects where I hardly got paid anything to do because I knew that it was going to be, or at least I hoped it was going to be a learning experience for me. Because in our industry, you're really, I guess like in life, 3 things steer my decisions. Am I doing it for money? Am I doing it for portfolio or experience? Or am I doing it for my network? Am I doing it for a relationship? It's great if you get 2 of those things, amazing if you get all 3 of those things, but you definitely need one of those. And, I've definitely done the free work to prove that I can do it or to learn along the way. I hate saying that because I personally think that everyone should get paid, even if it's like a reduced rate or whatever, like you should definitely be compensated. It's valuable. But in general, I would advise learning as much as possible before applying in terms of video storytelling. And when you are seeking those opportunities, one thing that I have noticed that is very helpful is calling out a specific thing that you want to learn about. When I say that, I mean, people come to me all the time and say, can I just shadow you for like a week or 2 or a month and just like come on all the productions and do all the things? And that to me is really overwhelming. It is a lot of energy for me to, create a learning opportunity that is actually beneficial. So it's really overwhelming to just say like, I want to see everything, like just show me everything, versus if you come to me and you say, hey, I really want to better understand how to light a product, or I really want to understand how you interface with clients, oh, sweet. Yeah, let's sit down and like talk about it for a couple hours. Like I'm down to do that. And then when a project comes up that I think, oh, we're doing something really fun with lighting, this person had an interest in this, like they can tag along and do that. I'll actually reach out and bring the person along. But it's, being intentional with how we learn and how we approach learning and asking for people's time really makes a huge difference. Yeah, I don't want to be like the huge Debbie Downer, but a huge part of our industry is do the time. And that does not mean that you should do it all for free. But you definitely have to like reach out for, hey, can I shadow? Can I come and help with X, Y, or Z? I would love to learn this type of stuff. Because it's very, very slim odds that a place like Microsoft would ever hire someone that has like taken a video class and never worked with a client before. Like that's a very long shot. So in general, you got to go fishing. If you want to catch any fish, you have to like prepare for the trip and be ready for it, for sure.
Kind of connects to what Tong Tong has shared earlier about like sometimes you just have to work hard.
Yeah.
And we have a question from Leah. Would you like to unmute and ask the question yourself, since we have some time left?
Sure. I won't go on video because I actually just did a Peloton workout before this. I have not yet showered, but hey, thank you guys all for doing this. I was wondering, what are some lessons you've learned about how to do personal branding well? I think you've all kind of touched on this with some really good advice, but wanted to hear if you have anything that you want to add about that topic.
I can start. Leah, of course, I want to know, like, what instructor did you take a class with? I want to know all the things. But congrats on a ride today, because I have not done one myself. But I would say I actually talk a lot about this in my work lately. Part of the work we do, I mentioned earlier, is like we partner with our client groups to understand like what their needs are. And sometimes the needs are just creating more equity for the people on the team. So I have some teams that are folks that are like new to corporate America. Like they've never worked a corporate job before. This is like their first rodeo, and they're just like, yeah, what do I do? Like, how do I advance here? How do I meet people here? Like, what do I got to do to figure out how to navigate this place? And so we do a lot of this like personal branding talk. And one of the things I think that resonated with me starting my career in office of the CEO for a very visible CEO whose brand was everything for him, was, I think this is such a buzzword too, and I kind of hate to say it, but like being yourself, and Victoria talked about, or Tori, sorry, touched on this earlier, that she looks for like that authenticity. And it's so true. Like anyone can come in and have, a stacked resume, a great place that they went to school. But if you don't have a story to tell that's real and that's unique to you, like you're never going to stick out to people, And when you think about your brand, one thing I always tell people is like, they're like, well, what is it technically? And I'm like, well, for me, when I think of my brand, I'm like, what do I want people to say about me when I'm not in the room? When people are making decisions and they're talking about promotions or talking about this high visibility project and who they need to bring on because so-and-so has done this in the past for me, I want them to think about me, right? And so I don't take my brand lightly. I think it is a big reason why I've been able to navigate my career change, going from corporate communications to DEI. Again, Tori talked about this earlier, is, being really, really clear about like why that shift is happening. And like, what is so, and another point that Tori made is like, if your background is so different from what you're trying to do or something you've never done before, like that is such an opportunity for you to talk about the things that are unique to you and why that makes a difference. Like most people aren't saying, hey, if you want to get a DEI career, go get a comms background in education. Like that's definitely not what they're saying, right? But now, as I mentioned earlier, I can take the skills that I know, the things I'm really good at and I know I'm good at, and bring it into my new world. But I think, all of that to say is like, think about your brand constantly. Like, not to make it like it's your end all be all, but in a lot of ways it is. It can take you 4 or 5 years to build a reputation of doing X, Y, or Z, and it could take you 10 seconds to ruin it. And so for me, like my brand is every day. Like I have to, every workshop I do, I come with the same energy. I try to always, show up as myself because that's what I'm preaching to my organization, right? Like I have to be real and I have to be authentic to who I am, because if I'm not, how can I be telling an entire organization to do the same thing and that we value them for it, right? I wanted them to see that there can be a value when you are yourself, and everyone's brand is different. And I think what's really cool about it is that brand and storytelling are so hands in hands. And, if, for those of you who are in the program today, just think about that as you're going through your classes. Those of you who are trying to figure out what's next, thinking about how I can position myself in a certain way to be ready for something different. It's so important to always have your brand at top of mind. And Jacob made a really great point earlier. It doesn't matter what you post. It is somewhere in the sphere of the internet, right? The first thing employers do is Google you, right? Google yourself. That's a really great place to start. If you've never done it, Google yourself. See what you need to take down. If there's like that picture with like a beer bong from 5 years ago in undergrad, like maybe we take that down, right? Because it affects your brand. Like a very self-respecting employer might not be like, well, yeah, I still like beer bongs on the weekends. Maybe not, right? I mean, the chances are slim, but it might be out there. So just know that, like, it's your brand is everywhere. Your brand is all the time. It's when you show up in a room. It's when you hop on a Zoom call. It's what you wear, how you talk, how you convince people. Which is great because there's so many opportunities for us to build a story around that and to hold ourselves to that standard. So that was probably a lot, but just wanted to emphasize the importance of that personal brand.
Well, thank you. 4 of you keep me really busy today taking notes with all the great advice you're sharing. We have one more question from Tay. Please correct me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Would you like to ask the question yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my question was, like what technical tools and resources do you use to transition into like these these leadership positions. And I'm thinking of like more like practical tools like databases or like educational resources to kind of familiarize yourself with like a different kind of part of the industry, and what you find work like other people have used in the past that is successful for them.
I can take a first stab at this one, and I might not be answering it properly. As far as learning about the organization, how it works, learning about new parts of the organization, like for Microsoft specifically, I just dove into their Learn content. So there's tons of Learn content that exists that give like detailed explanations of different parts of the products. There's also so much out there on YouTube, just YouTube videos of how to this complicated technical thing, which leads you down to the rabbit hole of, you know, everything that branches off of that. So just like the general, you know, internet of tutorials has been really useful, but none of that comes close to going and talking to people. Oh, sorry, there's many motorcycles going by right now. Going and talking to somebody who you think is an SME, if you don't know who any of the SMEs are, talk to someone who you think might be able to connect you with them. I love the 100 cups of coffee rule, like 100 cups of coffee to get a job, 100 cups of coffee to understand something complicated. Just keep digging in with those conversations. As far as like organizational tools and things like that, I have like a sticky note on the side of my computer that I keep track of like to-dos. I have a OneNote that is specific to every person that I talk to and topics that I want to, you know, dig deeper with them on, and also OneNote specific to projects. Some type of project management system or software. Trello is really nice to help you organize things as far as ideas and be able to move tasks around. Monday.com is another one that works really well for that and helps you keep projects organized and allows you to like tag other people and keep things zoomed out at a high level, but also drill down. Let me think of and like a very data specific one, because you did mention databases, not to plug my own product or anything, but Power BI Goals is a great way to track you know, your own personal goals and business goals against the data that you're dealing with. So that would be something cool to check out as well. That's really, I don't know if that answers your specific questions, but those are the big ones I use.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And with that, we're actually also almost at the end of our time together today. So I'm going to pass it back to Liao to close us out for today.
Yeah, thank you, Marina. And also just thank you so much to our panelists who happily agreed to be a part of this event and took the time to answer all the questions with our students today. And of course, thank you to everyone who joined our amazing discussion today. And again, just feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or the email address that we shared in the chat earlier. We'll stick around for a few more minutes in case you have any questions that we can answer. And just a quick note for prospective students, we're hoping to see you at Comm Lead Open House on November 18th. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you at another Comm Lead event. Thank you.